Today, I want to start with the word creativity and how often it just gets thrown around to the point that at times it doesn't even mean anything to me anymore. Creativity actually comprises of two different things. These two different halves that make what creativity is overall are often interchanged or mistaken for each other, which is where my confusion is coming from. I do want to start this episode by saying that this is not about establishing or viewing any of these halves as a hierarchy. This is more about availability. Some people have certain things available to them, but we are going to discern that in detail. The two halves of creative work are as follows. First one is the thing that happens to you, a thought that came, an idea that came that you just couldn't get rid of. And the other thing is what you do with it, catching it or harvesting it, or a daily habit. These two things are very different. The first thing, let's call it rain. I like to use the metaphor of rain, so that's what I'll be referring to the first half of creativity as for the rest of this video. Imagine that the rain is falling. Every droplet is an idea that you get in your mind. Now these, and I have these notes for me that I'm referring to. If I look down, that's what I'm doing. These ideas in the form of rain are not exactly a virtue or a moral gaining or some hard work or effort that paid off necessarily. It's not something that puts anyone on a hierarchy or a superiority, not at all. It's just something that someone has access to. A lot of the times, the very creative people that I've known who just get it, right? Like you can talk to them about a lot more than just the weather. Everything connects to everything. That kind of mind, in my experience, for me and some of my friends, has had this kind of upbringing where they had no choice but to be hypervigilant of a lot of things. That kind of hypervigilance can come from a household that is bizarre. Or it can come from having to watch constantly for threats. I now see that a lot of us, our brain is wired for connection. It's like an antenna, if you will. And every little thought or some random disparate events that happen to us, our brain is very good at connecting them. It's very good at pattern recognition. Women in particular are amazing at this. That's why we are so good at finding things out, and that's why we are so good to have conversations with. It's not that men are bad at it. It's just the large population of women are better at it than men are. And it's a different conversation altogether. My personal experience is that this has cost me being able to connect things, seemingly unrelated things to each other, is not necessarily a gift. My nervous system had to do that as a child. It had to detect threats constantly. It is our nervous system is actually meant to detect connection, but a lot of my nervous system was in fact meant to detect threats, because I used to want to step on eggshells is a light word, but I had my whole initial life, childhood, teenage, all of it, it was just about how do I get hit less, or how do I get shouted at less, or today I don't feel like hearing profanity, what can I do about that? So instead of being productive in any other sense, productivity for me as a kid was, hey, let's avoid being hit, and therefore I have to use all of my energy and my attention to scan for cues or to scan for a particular expression or a particular word that someone uses, which in my experience of data collection has meant threat, or how with my behavior can I mitigate that or minimize that. Now that I am safe and I'm not in that environment anymore, through years of healing, this attention has not turned off. Attention like that cannot turn off once it's turned on. So now my nervous system doesn't scan for threats, it scans for connection. That's the first part of the creativity, the rain. A lot of people have this rain, by the way. Again, it's not like a virtue or something. We'd like to think that it is, right? We'd like to think that it's a moral achievement or something, but it's not as special. It's actually pretty mundane. I think it's Elizabeth Gilbert who refers to the ancient Romans and the Greeks and the way they thought about creativity. They didn't think that a person just had genius. They thought that this genius or these flash of ideas is something that visited a person and then they left. So the person was just a container for it. That is the first part of creativity, the thing that I'm calling rain. It visits you and that's it. Why I think about this? Sometimes we have these random thoughts in the shower or mid walk, and if we are talking to a friend, we just, in the middle of a conversation with our friend, like we might just randomly say, hey, I thought of this, or this happened. And then your friend is like, I agree, that happened to me too. So why do they agree? If this happened to them too, then they can comprehend it, right? That means you are not unique in the sense that you got that thought or connection. What was unique here is that you were the one who said it out loud, and therefore two or three of your friends agreed with it. And that is what the second part of creativity, as I understand it, is. The second part is the harvesting. I talk about rain because rain falls everywhere. In India, we have the monsoon seasons, and a lot of the times, rain just flows, and in Mumbai, we have floods. What we can do, and they taught us this in school, is that every building, India has a lot of buildings, and sometimes they have bungalows in places, but these buildings have a large terrace on the top, and they taught us that you can build some sort of a system to harvest this rainwater because we have so much of it. And in India, like at least where I grew up, there was this water shortage sometimes, so the water used to be turned off, so we only had water 12 hours a day or sometimes 6 hours a day. They used to give us this notice, and after a point there was no water. So if the building collectively needed water, you had to have a meeting, and you had to be like, should we call this tanker from somewhere, like I don't know, that they just had water stored. And it used to be an experience, because if the tanker was attached to the main system where the water comes from for the building, like the bigger tank, it was always muddy at first, and we sometimes had to like take a bath in that, and nobody liked it. So this whole thing of water shortage at times, to combat it, they taught us in school that rainwater harvesting is a thing. And if you just use your terrace and you cleaned it up, or you did a few little somethings in it, then you can collect that rainwater and use it, and you won't in theory run out of water, because it rains quite a bit in the monsoons, and you can store it, and there were a lot of nuances there. That is what the second thing is about harvesting, about collecting it. Now a lot of people who are very consistent at being creative, or showing up rather, they capture the ideas as they come. This is something I've experienced in stark contrast now as opposed to 2 years ago. There is a bit of a story there as to why earlier I didn't think that collecting the ideas as they came to me was important, and the fact that ideas came to me itself was a gift. That's what I was taught, that creativity is a gift, and it already makes you special. It's very weird, but that's what a lot of the times Indian society teaches you, like you are gifted, you are creative. What I now realize is that it's just attention that for me came at a very high price of a lot of violence that I've known, and a lot of childhood, like I feel like I've lost. Now I do something with it, it's a different thing. So it's not a gift as I earlier thought, it's attention, and it can happen to anyone. It can happen particularly to people who care a lot. Not everyone cares a lot. Not everyone cares about the right things. I like to think I care about the right things. So that second part that I now do that I didn't do 2 years ago is collecting these ideas. Having a container which looks different for everyone to collect it, because once the idea goes away, once that shelf life goes away, it goes away. Once the rain has hit the ground, it goes into the gutter, or it just flows away, or it dries off. If you don't collect it, you never have that reservoir of ideas that you can then pull from. I am listening to this book called Storyworthy by Matthew Dicks. It's one of the best books I've read so far, and it's like a little bit of a practical guide on how to tell a story, but it's also the author, Matthew Dicks, he talks about one of the things, homework for life. He talks about every single day. We all have stories and moments in the most mundane things that are happening to us constantly. If we write them down in a few sentences or so, then we will never run out of stories. Now, there is a lot more there to homework for life than what I just paraphrased it as. But the point is that is one way, one habit to build a container to catch these ideas. And that second part of the second half of creativity is what a lot of people that you see online do. They're very good at it. They show up. They have built a habit to show up. How they did that is a very different thing and a very different conversation altogether, because it takes a lot to build it. It's different for everyone. But the fact that they have built it is the second half, which a lot of people think that the building of the habit itself is creativity. And some people think that the gift or the rain that comes to them in the mind of ideas is creativity. But I have now realized that it is a combination of both. This is something that I think a lot of people need to hear, because that nuance is what gives me clarity of thought. I wish someone had explained this to me earlier, just a year ago. For the context of my life, I have a lot of thoughts, and I have, as it turns out, been having these thoughts for 30 years. I'm like for 29 years now. A lot of the times these thoughts just disappeared during my shower or mid walk or just in the gym session when I am resting between two barbell sets. I got a nice thought, it disappeared. But a few times after the gym, when my husband and I went together, I said it out loud. Hey, you know what I was thinking about today during my lunges or barbell squats? And he's like, oh yeah, I have the same. And then a few times when I said this to my friends, they were like, oh yeah, true. And then I realized the difference is that I said it out loud. If they had been the one to say it to me for whatever reason, then they would have touched on that second half of the creativity. It's not the idea generation itself that was special. And the more I started to do it, the more I realized, for me, I talk to friends all the time anyway. I might as well put a camera here, talk into the camera, sometimes have my little dog beside me, because this is like work. And so he feels included, and it's a good idea for him to learn to settle, which he's not very good at, but sometimes he's learning. And it's nice because then I get to do my thing, something that I think I'm already naturally okay at, that I can now refine with practice. And practice steps is a whole other conversation. That I can have my dog around. Like, who doesn't want to work with their pet around? So my habit that I'm trying to build, that I have gotten more or less okay at, is just show up, talk into the camera. At first I thought that I would just raw dog it, but a few times when I did, I was like, actually I have these specific insights in a day that are concrete enough to be an episode on their own. There is a premise there that I could expand on, and so I wrote down a little few things about this particular premise that I wanted to talk about. I realized a few years ago I also read this book where one of the lines really stuck with me, and I can't paraphrase it right now, nor can I recollect it exactly as it is, but I remember the feeling of it. And it was that there is no chosen one here. That story was about misfits who they did things. They decided to change the course of their life. And a lot of the times these YA young adult novels or novels of an adventure are about a chosen one who has to save the world. I don't always like the chosen one narrative unless Suzanne Collins has written it. Now, like that, I have grown from thinking of creativity, or the first half of creativity, the idea generation part. I've come a long way from thinking about it as a chosen one, oh I'm so special narrative, to this can happen to anyone. It really is. In some people the rain is heavier, in some people it's more sparse. Either of those things mean nothing if you don't collect it. And that second half, if you collect it, some people have a lighter flow of rain, and that's just what's available to them. No shade, no nothing. Some people have a very high, heavy flow of creativity. Doesn't make them better. But let's say both of these people are collecting ideas. Well, then the collecting is what matters most. In my experience, there is the last bit of observation that I want to say. People who have a lot of heavy ideas have it because their attention was never turned off since a child. And that attention usually used to scan for threats that is now being scanned for connection, as I earlier said. It takes a lot of work, and sometimes a decade or 2 decades worth of work to change the goalpost. Like earlier, I couldn't help but scan for threats all the time, but now that I'm safe, it's some work that I have done, but it's also luck there. Not everyone gets to be safe at 30. Some people only get to feel safe at 35. You will always get out of your bad situation. You will always. There is hope there, but it can take time, and depending on how much time it takes, you will have a lot of baggage that might not enable you to make that container for yourself, because building that habit, making that container, is not just someone tells you and you do it. Even if logically your brain knows it, your nervous system and your body will take years to learn it, to comprehend it. It takes that long to build that container. So in my experience, the people who have that lighter rainfall in their mind don't have that kind of baggage that prevents them from building the container that they catch the ideas with and then execute. People who have a heavy rainfall like me, it took me years to first think that I have something to say and that it can be okay, that I'm not nothing. And that baggage, as I now understand it, a lot of people have, Indians don't always feel confident early on, and there's a reason for it, and we'll talk about it later. So race and your upbringing, it shouldn't matter, but it does, as it turns out. So again, it's just a matter of what's available to you. For heavy rain getters, building a container isn't as easily available to them, but it's not impossible either. That's what I want to conclude with, that there is no hierarchy that we are talking about. There is no one better than the other mechanism here. It's really all about trying to do it enough to understand the nuance of these concepts, as it turns out. Now, the attention part itself, well, can you train that kind of attention? Absolutely. If you need to have a lot of constraints, is what I've seen though. And it's not that external circumstances always need to make these constraints. And this is a very silly example, it just came to me. But some dude bros online, they're good, okay, no shade, but they are always about, do an ice bath. And I'm like, no girl, I am not gonna do that. When the light used to go in my house when I was a kid, we used to already take really cold baths. I don't want to recreate that experience. So people who have had a relatively stable life, or who've had a lot of opportunities, sometimes need to go ahead and find struggles that they can then use to create a good relationship with stress, or to just feel like an obstacle, feel like they have an obstacle. A lot of the times, people from richer Western countries or richer backgrounds, they don't have that kind of struggle. So they often go do very crazy activities, don't they? They go parasailing or they go bungee jumping to get that adrenaline from somewhere else. I don't need to do that because I already had a lot of adrenaline growing up from external circumstances that weren't in my control. So I believe that that kind of attention is something you can train, but it depends on the constraints. You can train it with some friction in your life. Where that friction comes on from is a completely different question, but because I am maintaining this narrative now that it's not a chosen one thing, I'm not special, I'm just someone doing good work. I like to, that narrative keeps me on the ground. I want to be on the ground. I don't want this to get to my head, or I don't want to feel too much of myself. I have relatives who got lucky with things, and then things got to their head and now they talk down to us, and my parents and me, and I know what it feels like. So with that in my mind, I want to echo so many times that this is not about being special, this is just about availability. Now that's where I'll end my thoughts for today. And I think this bully stick that I gave my puppy is at this much, like this much is left. He ate a big part of it, but the rest that is left can be a choking hazard, and so it's my job to just make sure that he doesn't swallow it. He has once swallowed it, nothing happened, but I want to check in with that. So that's what I'm gonna do, and I'll see you soon.